Every time you raised your voice in an argument, every time you explained yourself to someone who disrespected you, every time you chased closure from a conflict, drafted that message, deleted it, rewrote it, sent it, you carved the knife deeper into your own throat. The weak man reacts, the weak man defends, the weak man fills silence with words because he cannot bear the weight of the void. And in doing so, he hands his enemies the only weapon they need: certainty. Certainty that they have penetrated him, certainty that he is controllable. Tonight, you master the architecture of silence in conflict. Once you grasp this, no argument, no betrayal, no provocation will ever extract another drop from you. You will become the abyss they cannot read, the shadow they cannot strike, the prince who ruled not through declarations,
but through the terror of the unspoken. In 1478, after the Pazzi conspiracy nearly destroyed the Medici dynasty, Lorenzo de' Medici did not flood Florence with proclamations of vengeance. He did not defend his honor in the public square. He withdrew, silent, calculating. The conspirators who survived the initial bloodbath expected rage, expected theater, expected Lorenzo to telegraph his next move. Instead, they received nothing. No emissaries, no messages, just the slow, suffocating realization that they were being watched, that the silence itself was the sentence. Within months, they fell, not to spectacle, but to the invisible blade of a man who had learned Machiavelli's unwritten law before Machiavelli was even born. The prince who speaks least rules longest. Machiavelli observed this in the courts of Renaissance Italy. Like he watched princes who shouted their intentions become predictable, defeatable, dead, and he watched the quiet ones, the men who let adversaries drown in their own assumptions, survive, consolidate, conquer. Sun Tzu called it formlessness. The Roman emperors called it gravitas. The truth is colder. When you withhold words in the heat of conflict, you become a god to those who need your reaction to feel secure. Most men today erupt like fools the moment their ego is pricked. They text paragraphs. They corner people for conversations. They perform their hurt like actors begging for an audience. You will not be that man. Silence is your throne. And from that throne, you watch them bleed themselves dry. First, confusion. The human brain is wired for pattern completion. When they strike at you, verbally, emotionally, always strategically, they expect the dopamine hit of your reaction. Anger, defense, explanation. When you give them nothing, their neural circuits misfire. The script they rehearsed in their head collapses. They replay the confrontation in obsessive loops, searching for the response that never came. This is where the wound begins. Next, panic. Silence is a mirror. In the absence of your words, they see only their own aggression reflected back, naked, unjustified, humiliating. They begin to question whether they miscalculated, whether you're unfazed because you are stronger, whether your silence conceals a counterstrike they cannot anticipate. Their cortisol spikes, their sleep fractures. They draft messages to you they will never send. They ask mutual acquaintances if you have said anything about them. They hate themselves for caring.
this is the second stage of collapse. Finally, obsession. The void you create becomes the loudest presence in their psychology. They scroll past your name and feel a jolt of adrenaline. They see you in public and their body tenses, preparing for a confrontation that will not come. You have done nothing, said nothing, and yet you have carved a theater of fear inside their skull where you perform endlessly silently, without ever setting foot on stage. They begin to attribute power to you that you never claimed. Mystery becomes menace. Absence becomes authority. You have become the silence that echoes in their skull, inescapable. This is not cruelty. This is mathematics. The mechanics of dominance operating beneath the threshold of morality. When they provoke you, insult, accusation, passive aggression, they are not seeking truth.
They are seeking your reaction. The reaction confirms their narrative. It validates their aggression. It gives them the emotional closure they crave. Deny them. Let the provocation hang in the air like smoke. Say nothing. Do nothing. Walk away if you must. In ancient courts, the prince who responded immediately to every slight was seen as weak, controllable. The prince who let slights accumulate in silence, then struck once decisively when he chose, was feared. Machiavelli wrote of Cesare Borgia's patience. He endured betrayals without visible response, letting conspirators grow comfortable, then dismantled them in a single night. This is how silence carves fear. Their first strike becomes their last certainty. After conflict, do not linger in their orbit seeking resolution. Do not clear the air. Vanish. Delete the thread. And stop appearing in spaces they occupy. Let them wonder if you have written them off entirely or if you are preparing something they cannot see. The psychological term is intermittent reinforcement, but the ancients knew it simply as dread. When you remove the predictability of your presence, you become a phantom. Sun Tzu. Appear where they do not expect you. Attack where they are unprepared. But the deepest cut is this. Sometimes the attack is never coming. Sometimes the withdrawal is the punishment. They will scan every room for you. Every notification will carry the ghost of your name, and you will be nowhere. This is the cruelty of gods, present in absence, punishing through void. This is how silence carves fear. If they reach out, are we okay? Why aren't you talking to me? What did I do? Resist the civilized reflex to reassure. Do not explain. Do not educate. Do not give them the map to your interior. A response, even a cold one, is still engagement. It tells them the silence was tactical, which means it can be negotiated. But if you give nothing, not even acknowledgement of their message, the silence transforms from strategy into existential reality. They are forced to accept that perhaps you simply do not care, that they have been erased. Machiavelli observed that the cruelest princes were not those who tortured enemies publicly, but those who forgot them entirely. To be ignored is to be unmade. The medieval concept of damnatio memoriae, erasure from history, was considered worse than execution. You are not being rude. You are practicing an ancient form of annihilation. This is how silence carves fear. Human beings cannot tolerate ambiguity in conflict. When you refuse to provide clarity, they will generate it themselves. And almost always, they will imagine something worse than reality. Let them. Do not correct their paranoid fantasies. Do not clarify your intentions. The void you create becomes a canvas on which they paint their worst fears. He's planning something. He told everyone. He's moved on completely, and I meant nothing. Each invented narrative is a blade they turn on themselves. The Roman Emperor Tiberius was a master of this. He would receive reports of treason, say nothing, do nothing, then let the accused unravel in the silence, often confessing to crimes he had never suspected. This is leverage without labor, power without action. You simply stand still and let their mind do the violence. This is how silence carves fear. If circumstances demand you eventually re engage, do so as a fundamentally altered presence, colder, more formal, with the exact warmth you would afford a stranger. No reference to the conflict, no acknowledgement of what transpired. Treat them as if the version of you they knew has been archived, and they are now interacting with a sovereign who has no memory of their offense because it was beneath notice. This is the final psychological fracture. They will feel it immediately. He's different. I've lost something I can't get back. They have. You have killed the version of yourself that could be wounded by them, and they are mourning a ghost. Ancient kings would grant audiences to disgraced courtiers months after betrayals, even but would look through them as if seeing distant landscapes. The message was clear. You are scenery now, background, less than enemy, irrelevant. This is not forgiveness. This is fossilization. You have encased them in the amber of your indifference forever. This is how silence carves fear. You now possess 5 blades most men will never sharpen. Wield them coldly. Wield them without mercy. Wield them in utter silence. You no longer react. You no longer explain. You no longer bleed in conflict. The version of you that chased closure in arguments, that needed the last word, that drafted desperate texts in the dark, that man is dead. You have performed the surgery yourself. What remains is something harder. Something they cannot map or manipulate or move. When they strike at you now, they will strike at smoke. When they demand accountability, they will demand it from a void. When they beg for clarity, they will beg to a throne that does not acknowledge beggars. This is the moment you cease being the fool who argues his worth in the marketplace of other people's opinions, and become the shadow that commands without speaking, the prince who lets courtiers scheme and panic while he watches from the silent galleries of power, untouched, unmoved, inevitable. You are no longer in the game of conflict. You are above it, outside it. You have transcended the need to win arguments because you have grasped the ultimate principle. The argument you do not have is the argument you have already won. You are now untouchable. You are now silent. You are now sovereign. If this cut deep, inscribe in the comments, fear the unspoken to seal it.
Like this transmission, subscribe to the path, activate notifications so you never miss the blade. Weak men will argue with the screen and scroll away, unchanged, still bleeding tomorrow. Powerful men will act in silence. They will close this video and immediately withdraw from a conflict they were about to lose by speaking. They will leave a message unanswered. They will walk past someone who expects confrontation and give nothing. They will practice the annihilation of the void. Which one are you? Remember, every word you withhold is a year added to your reign. Every silence you maintain is a scar carved into someone else's certainty. You're not being cold, you're being correct. The universe does not argue. The void does not explain. The abyss does not negotiate. And neither do you. In the void of your words, empires of fear are born.